Greetings, programs. Let's talk about AI. The warning, this presentation will be expired in 3 weeks. I was updating slides this morning. It was great. If you want the slides, they will go by fast. You can get them at wherecanigettheslides.com. All right, let's talk. Obviously, you can't sneeze without hitting something about artificial intelligence, about language models in general. So today we're going to dig into what all this stuff is. If you're unfamiliar, like I doubt anyone in this room is, but there's a lot of different ways to access these now. So there's, of course, OpenAI, Google Bard. You have generative search experiments in Google, where Google is now putting summarization into search results. If you work in SEO, this is a problem. You have Bing, of course. You have Claude. You have open source systems like GPT for All, which we'll talk about in a bit. When we talk about large language models, model is a fancy word for software. When you hear model, it's software. In the same way that Microsoft Word is software made by humans for humans, a model is software made by AI for AI. This is important because a lot of the things we talk about, like Bing and Bard, those are interfaces to models. This is going to become really important as we see an explosion of these new models. The interface is like, the steering wheel of your car. The model is the engine, and they can be swapped out. What is this stuff? What is a large language model? All of this starts from a quote from 1957 by John Rupert Firth, a specialist in linguistics, who said, "You shall know a word by the company it keeps." You shall know a word by the company it keeps. If I say, I'm brewing the tea, for most English speakers, it's pretty apparent that I'm talking about a beverage made of hot water and a dried leaf. Now, if I say, I'm spilling the tea, this is different. One word changes the meaning of another word. There are statistical distributions in how words work. Right? We all know this from the language that we use. If I say, I pledge allegiance to the next logical word is. If I say, God save the, or king, a lot of you need to update your databases. You know these statistical representations. That's what language models are. They are nothing more than big statistical databases. Here's how they work. This is the unhelpful version. This is from 2017. This is a paper called Attention is All You Need. We will not get into the mathematics of this. It's not fun, and it's only 8:30. Imagine text, lots and lots of text from all over the place. Imagine text as a pizza, right? And your cookbook is a model. The way these things are constructed is a company like Anthropic or Google or Facebook or OpenAI goes around the world and eats every possible pizza, right? In addition to being violently ill, they're taking notes. And when they're done, all those notes get collated into a cookbook, right? The model is the cookbook, which is important because if you've ever done any cooking, you know that there's no actual food in a cookbook, right? It's just recipes for how you can make your own food. And then when you ask a model, tell me how to make a pizza, it will spit out some understanding, even if the pizza is something that you've never heard of before. That's how these things work. They take enormous amounts of data, mostly text, ingest them, summarize them down to mathematical distributions, and then when you talk to them through an interface, they spit out what they remember from the notes. The original text is not in the model. Really important. Ask it for creamed corn and mushroom pizza or pineapple and mushroom pizza. Now, you can argue about whether pineapple belongs in pizza or not, but the models know it because they've probably seen it or some variation of it. Right? That's how these language models work. They are nothing more than libraries of probabilities, guessing what's next. How do we talk to them? We talk to them through something called prompt engineering, which is fancy for talking. Again, you shall know a word by the company it keeps. If you talk to a model with very few words, you will get a statistical distribution of the most common things associated with those words. So if I give a model like, write a short paragraph about how AI is being used in marketing, this is Claude, it spit out a very bland, kind of boring, very generic paragraph. Why? I didn't give it very many words. I gave very few words, and so mathematically it's saying, well, what are the words most commonly tied to AI and marketing? And this is what it spits out. It's generic. If I say, write a short paragraph about how AI is being used in marketing with a focus on transformer-based generative AI, such as those found in GPT-4 and Claude 2, now the text changes. Why? I gave it more words. I gave it more relevant words, so now the statistical distributions change, and it can dig down further into its library and say, well, you want to know about transformers, which means you don't want to know about diffusers. You don't really care about predictive analytics. You really care about generative AI. And so the text it delivers is better. If I say, you're an artificial intelligence expert, you know AI, machine learning, deep learning, et cetera, you also know marketing, digital marketing, customer journeys, your first task is to write a short paragraph about the use of generative AI, and so on and so forth. We get a much better piece of text. Why? Again, more relevant words. When you're doing prompt engineering, it's all about more relevant words. There's a framework that we have, but this general concept applies to pretty much every model out there. It's going to apply to Microsoft Copilot. It's going to apply to Google Docs. The more relevant words you use, the better it performs. The framework, the structure that we use is called RACE, Role, Action, Context, Execute. If you want to construct reasonably effective prompts across platforms, this is the structure to use. So you would say things like, your role, you are a Google Analytics certified professional. You know Google Analytics 4, Google Tag Manager, Google Looker Studio, BigQuery. We're giving it role-based words that give it guidelines. Start digging up probabilities on these things. Action. Your first task is to examine this channel of grouping data and analyze the overall composition of site traffic. You will be analyzing for marketing channel diversity. Again, more words, more relevance, more statistical distributions. Context. Here's a whole bunch of data, right? So this is data exported out of Google Analytics. Execute. Analyze the composition of the site traffic and provide recommendations in bullet point format for marketers' next steps to increase traffic. Right? This is the format. When you put this in, what it spits out is your analysis. Here's the data, the largest sources of traffic, and here's 8 things that you can do to improve your channel traffic diversity. Now again, this works in ChatGPT, it works in Claude, it works in LLaMA. This structure will help you get the most out of any large language model that you're working with. If you want, there's a free download. Go to TrustInsights.ai/prompt sheet to get that exact structure if you want to copy it. I did tell you can get the slides where I can get the slides.com, right? Okay. Let's talk about use cases. There are 6 broad categories of what large language models are good at: generation, extraction, summarization, rewriting, classification, and question answering. Let's talk about these categories. Generation, everybody knows this one, right? Hey, write me a blog post, write me an email. Generation is actually one of the 2 tasks that models are least good at. And they're least good at because they're trying to come up with new predictions on existing statistical probabilities. And so that is something that, even though we use this a ton, they're not extra good at it. But they are getting much better. And the bigger a model is, and the more focused and tuned it is, the better it gets at things like generation. It's not just marketing content, right? You can say, hey, I need a GDPR-compliant privacy policy. It will spit one out. I did this recently, had a human lawyer check it, and they said, okay, it's pretty good. Maybe miss this thing, go back and add this in. One of the critical things with any kind of generation is you must have subject matter experts that are humans QAing it, because they do say things very confidently wrong. Right? They're very good at sounding confident. It's like, I saw a quote the other day said, generative models are really good at mansplaining. And I was like, ugh. But it's true. You can have them write code in just about any popular programming language. And so if you have an idea that you want to bring to life, or there's a task that you're struggling with every month that gets so boring, you can have these models write code and then you execute that code on your laptop, and it does it. For example, I asked it to write a piece of code to extract out all of the text from a PowerPoint presentation so I could summarize it and make an executive summary for a report. That saves me an hour, probably an hour every couple of weeks for a client, because I now can just have those notes come out, boom. But that's a Python script that it wrote for me that I can now run. Extraction is the second category. Extraction. These models can take any context of data, a pile of data, say, pull stuff out of it. So here is a mission statement, and I said, give me some semantic ideas for additional SEO keywords. Very straightforward, but now take all of the text you have, because some of these models, like Claude, can accept 60 to 70,000 words at a time, and you can do very, very large-scale extraction. You can even do it with competitors if you want. You can do exports and identify key points. So this is one of my favorite use cases of all. This is, I have a transcript from a meeting, action items, meeting notes, stuff. I don't really want to relive that meeting again. So I can take the transcript and say, give me these action items. And you can do this within ChatGPT or Claude themselves. There are also packaged softwares. This is one called Otter AI. And there's a language model built right in now. It's called Otter Chat on the right-hand side to say, show me the meeting notes and action items so that I don't have to relive the glory of this meeting. And it does that, and you take that and run with it. It's so convenient, saves so much time, and it makes for happier customers. Because when the model summarizes the action items, you forget less stuff. And that makes for much, much happier customers. Imagine in a call center, if a call center takes a transcript from a call, it summarizes it, pulls out the action items, and puts it into the customer's CRM record. Now, the next time that customer comes back, you can say, did we accomplish what we wanted to accomplish with this customer? Are they happier now? Just not forgetting stuff is a huge, huge advantage. You can extract data from content. Now, OpenAI has run into some trouble with this recently, but there are other services that can do this. You give it a URL and say, extract all the links from this page. Again, if you're doing stuff like SEO work, this is a really, really handy way to do it. The third category is summarization. Summarization is taking a bunch of text and shrinking it down. This is a fun one. I took 20 interviews from a nonprofit I was working with, and I asked people, what do you think this organization is about? And took all 20 and boiled it down and said, okay, this is the mission statement of your organization based on all the things that you said. And it came up with a very good, solid mission statement. What's important is it's not writing anything new, right? It is condensing down to the most important stuff. This is one of the tasks models are best at, summarizing, because there's no new data. It's just analyzing the statistics, the probabilities of the data you've already given it. If you work with any kind of customer data, or any kind of customer feedback, you have an enormous marketing opportunity. You can use the voice of the customer, the literal words of the customer in your marketing. So this is an example. I took, my teacher's martial arts school has a whole bunch of reviews on Google Reviews. I copied and pasted all the 5-star reviews, and I said, now I want you to make me social media advertising content for Instagram from this using customer words, right? Because as marketers, we have a tendency to say, oh, we're the best and turnkey, scalable, flexible, blah, blah, blah. All the things that we think our customers care about, and probably about half the time we're wrong. If we use the actual words customers are saying in our marketing copy, we resonate better with the people who are actually buying stuff. Right? We can focus on what people are buying and why they're buying it from us. So using tools to do this kind of extraction, to do this kind of summarization from the voice of the customer. We have given lip service as marketers to the voice of the customer for 70 years, but we now have the tools to actually listen to them, even if we don't want to. You can take transcripts. This is, if you want to create content that preserves your voice, you can take transcripts and condense down those transcripts into other forms of content, you can transmute them. Again, this is super helpful because instead of having a Claude or a ChatGPT write in that sort of neutral, boring, corporate voice, if you have ways you say things, you can have these tools summarized in your voice. And that's so important for preserving that uniqueness, that identity. The fourth category is rewriting content. This is a fun one. A person who I was working with sent me an NDA, and it was awful. I looked at it and said, I'm not signing this. This is, where did you find this? Like on Reddit? And this is like, maybe. And I said, let's rewrite this with what's supposed to be in an NDA, to spit it back out properly. And I had a human lawyer look at it, and they said, good thing you didn't sign that first one, because A, it'd be unenforceable, and B, it looks like they were drunk when they're writing it. The cleanup one's much better. Doing legal document review and rewrites is super powerful, and this is any kind of document rewrite and review. If you get, say, a contract of some kind or a piece of paperwork of some kind, and you specify your conditions in the prompt, you can say, should I sign this? And ask it that, and then we'll say no or maybe yes. You can use these tools for professional development. This is one of the most understated uses of these tools. If I talk to you about model parameters and model weights and how these tools are built, that these language models are built, chances are before I get much further than tokenization, you will be asleep no matter how much coffee you've had. I fall asleep sometimes reading these papers. But you can ask them to explain it in terms that you understand. I said to explain parameters and weights in language models. And it said parameters are like the ingredients of the pizza, and weights are how much of each ingredient. Like, oh, I understand these terms now. Every time or any time you are sitting in a meeting and somebody says something you don't understand, pull out your phone quietly, open up the language model choice and say, explain this to me in something that I understand. If you play music, right, you can say, explain this to me in terms of piano. If you play golf, explain it in terms of golf. And the concepts that are out there that you're struggling to understand from a professional development perspective become easier because the model can rewrite information to fit inside your brain. Right? So these are incredible tools. If you've ever sat in a meeting and with a staff member and you're like, I don't really want to look stupid. I want to ask a stupid question in front of my team. I should know this. Pull out your phone, ask the model to explain it to you, and you go look at it quick and go, okay, now I can participate in this meeting because I know what the hell you're talking about. Right? These models are professional development masters if you use them for it. Sometimes you can have them rewrite things. This is a memo. It says, Bob, you sent over 2 months of invoices in one day. Of course it's not done. It's not going to be done anytime soon because this takes time, and if you need it sooner, you shouldn't let it sit on your desk for 2 weeks. Get an F right off, and we'll get it when you get it. Go after yourself. Rewrite in a professional tone of voice. Dear Bob, I hope this message finds you well. If you've ever had that moment where you're like, this is what I want to say, but I will get fired if I say it to a machine. Let the machine help you. Rewriting. Classification is the fifth example, being able to interpret text and classify it. Right? List 3 topics this article could be classified in. If maybe you've inherited a corporate blog or a large amount of text, I need to classify this stuff so that I can decide what topics we should blog about or not. You can use language models to process that data on your behalf instead of reading 2,000 blog posts, and then you can match that data up maybe through Google Analytics data and say, hey, this topic is the one that consistently gets more engagement. Let's focus on that. You can do personality analysis. This is a fun one. I was on a call 2 days ago with someone who I've just met from a new partner company, and I took the transcript, I removed my talking, just put their talking and said, tell me about this person's personality, right? How open they are, how conscientious they are, how extroverted, agreeable, how neurotic they are. It turns out they're a very nice person. For those of us who are maybe a little neurodivergent and have trouble reading and understanding people, these tools are enormous helps. Right? They can help us understand people. Imagine if you have this built into your call center and you know the personalities of the people who in your call center. Maybe you match up personality traits with the appropriate representative so that somebody who is a super extrovert is not paired with someone who's a super introvert and they just walk all over the customer. And the customer's like, I didn't get a chance to talk. I hate you guys. I'm leaving. Right? Imagine you have a salesperson who wants to get to know a new prospect or a new client services manager who just got a prospect inherited from a salesperson. You feed that data, provide the personality analysis, and now your team has a better sense of who you're talking to. They can know more about, okay, this is the kind of person that is on the other end. These are cues that help. Classification. And finally, question answering. People use language models like search engines, even though they shouldn't. That's not what they're good at. Right? Question answering is a form of generation, and yet one of the most popular use cases is asking these things questions. What are the advantages of the marketing automation system? It spits out a whole bunch of stuff. Question answering is really important because that's what people do in conversation. So we need to make sure that we are using these models and asking the questions that we think our customers are asking to see what they say. Now, when should you be using this stuff? When should you be using these things? There's 4 general categories. There's 2 types of tasks. There are creative tasks. I call them generation or writing tasks. And then there's comparison tasks mathematically or editing tasks. Writing is things like generation, question answering. Editing or comparison is rewrite, summarize, extract, classify. And there are 2 types of content. There's generic or commodity content, and then there's creative or expert content. How many people have stayed in a hotel for this event? Okay, almost everybody. Tell me right now, who knows for sure, just raise your hand, what the painting is on the hotel room wall in your room. What is it of? One person. Okay, 2 people, that's it. Out of a room where everybody raises their hands. Why? Because it's commodity content, right? Do we actually care what the painting is? It's probably flowers, a sailboat, or some local building, right? It's usually a watercolor. That's commodity content. Do we need humans to generate that? Not really, right? It can be that the pot of flowers, everyone will be happy that the wall's not blank. No one really cares what's on the wall, right? How many of you, when you've been in a hotel room, have said, you know what? What if I could steal this painting and take it home? Nobody, right? A, it's illegal. But nobody says, that is such a good painting of watercolor sailboats that I'm going to take that home, right? It's commodity content. AI should be used for commodity content, for sure. Any kind of comparative content, like meeting notes and summarization, you should always be using AI. There's no reason for human to do that. For generation, if you're doing stuff like summarizing SEC earnings calls, right, or meeting transcripts, or writing a blog post that summarizes some keynote you saw at some event, you can use machines to do that. You can use machines to do comparison tasks that are creative as well. So a creative comparative task would be rewriting a blog post in your tone of voice. Stuff that is truly creative, that requires subject matter expertise, you can use AI, but you're better off using humans a lot of the time, unless you're going to scale it later. Because the more subject matter expertise you require to make good content, the more complex the prompt has to be and the better the language model has to be. It's very difficult to do that. So if you're writing just one piece of really killer content, use a human. Right? If you are making one custom image or one theme song that you're never going to do that task again, use a human. If you're going to do it a million times, then yeah, you may need to invest in AI to do that. But in general, for decision-making processes, this is a way to help think about, should we use AI for it or not? What are the risks of these things? Paul alluded to some of them. First one is bias. These models, again, they vacuumed up all the text on the internet. They vacuumed up all the public text on the internet. There's a lot of crap on the internet. Right? There's a lot of, these are mirrors of humanity, right? These are what these things really are. They are mirrors of everything that we've written, which means that all the good stuff that we write is in there, and all the bad stuff we write is in there. There's a corpus called the Common Crawl. And Common Crawl is this nonprofit that just crawls the web. And when you go and look inside this data set is used by every major language model company to train their models. When you look in what's in Common Crawl, you see things like white supremacy sites. You see sites that are advocating the execution of certain ethnic groups. And that's because it's on the public internet. That is in these models as well. So all that stuff is in there. So be aware. This is OpenAI's disclosure right on their website. We found that our models more strongly associate European American names with positive sentiment when compared to African American names, and negative stereotypes with black women. So if you were deploying these models, say, as a chatbot, right, should Linda and Letitia get the same service from your chatbot? The answer is yes. Will they? Maybe not. So part of your job is to be constantly QAing these things to say, are they staying on the rails? Let's talk about copyright. Remember, there's 2 aspects of copyright. One is what the model is trained on, and 2, what the model spits out. What the model spits out, machine-generated content, is ineligible for copyright. In the USA for sure, and in many other places. If a machine made it, it is ineligible for copyright because our laws say only humans can hold copyright. In the famous case in 2018, Naruto versus Slater, a chimpanzee took a selfie with a camera, and the photographer who owned the camera tried to sue somebody for using the photo, and the courts ruled, nope, you didn't take that photo, the chimp did. Chimps can't hold copyrights, and therefore the image is in public domain. Everything that a machine spits out is public domain. It is not copyrightable, no matter what the terms of service on the software says. Legally, it cannot be protected. So if you convert your entire blog to machine-generated content, a competitor can just copy-paste your blog, put it on their site, and you can't do anything about it. That's one side of copyright. The other side of copyright is the models themselves. This is an unresolved area right now. In the EU says, hey, that cookbook that you composed of all those pizzas violates the original pizza's copyrights. Right? The EU is saying the training data, the model itself is a violation of copyright because you scraped all that data without permission. Japan went the opposite way and said the training of models does not violate copyright. So models built in Japan or by companies doing business in Japan are not infringing on copyrights. in an attempt to lure more tech companies to Japan. The US is unresolved yet, so this is an area where there's a lot to be discovered still. And legislation, as Paul talked about. One thing we can be pretty certain of when it comes to governments, especially the US government, is that any legislation they come up with is going to be ineffective. Just seems how things work. However, jurisdictions matter. So as you start using these tools, as you start working with these tools, jurisdictions matter because what's legal in one place is not in another. So if you're doing business with multiple areas, just like GDPR and CPRA and all these things, you have to be aware of that and know how to use these models that are in compliance with where it is that you're doing business. Finally, and this is relatively new, there's a concept called model poisoning. There's a lot of models, particularly that are open source ones, that are available online, and companies are giving these things away. The Falcon model, for example, was given away. I want to say it was the United Arab Emirates that published that. China, the government of China, released a new state-of-the-art model relatively recently that performs very well. It's open, it's free for everyone to use. Curiously, when you ask that model questions about China or Marxism, it's very positive and complimentary all the time. Weird. Model poisoning means if someone uses that to reweight an additional model and blend them together, now you have this biased information that was intentionally biased flowing into other models. Right, so you have to be aware of the lineage and provenance of what models you're using, how that data was brought together, where it came from. There's was another one called Worm GPT the other day that, again, has contaminants in it. And so anyone merging in other data from that, they now have really problematic data inside their models. So model poisoning is an issue. So how do we use this stuff? How do we deploy it? Well, there's 4 stages in your journey you're going to take. Prompt engineering, prompt deployment, fine-tuning models, and app construction. Prompt engineering is the easiest one. Again, you're just going to be using these tools. The challenge is, with all these models, which model do you use? A lot of it depends on 2 factors. One, privacy. If you are working with any kind of protected information, personally identifying information, sensitive protected information, protected healthcare information, you have to be using open source models that are run on your systems. You absolutely positively should never, ever, ever use ChatGPT or Google Bard because you are handing off sensitive protected data to a third party. Right? Do not do that. So that's choice number 1. Is it protected information? If so, it has to be run with a local open source model run locally on your computers. 2, how much data you're working with. If you're working with, say, less than 6,000 words of data, chances are you're going to use probably the OpenAI ecosystem to some degree. If you're working with data that's greater than 6,000 words or 8,000 tokens, you're probably going to be using the Claude system from Anthropic because it can handle up to 66,000 words at a time. Right? So if you're doing transcripts or summarizations or book summaries, that's the tool you're going to use. So these models, as they proliferate, as they grow, as more companies come up, one of the things you're going to want to do is build this chart for your company, for your specific use cases. Hey, we have transcripts we need to process from the board meeting. We'll use this tool. And make it a flow chart, but do this work internally so that you don't have a whole bunch of people confused as to going, what do I do? Here's the flow chart for how you use these tools and sew them together. Prompt engineering, very simple. You use the tools with the prompt structures. All of the tools like the LLaMa model, and all of its branches, the Falcon model, et cetera, if you run those locally on your computer, this is one tool called LM Studio, and your computer's decent enough, it's like a good video gaming laptop, you can use that safely and get good results with private information. And these tools can even can simulate OpenAI's API. So if you wanted to write code that interfaces with these local models, it will do that, and it does that very capably. You will also be using the language prompts in pretty much everything. This is Visual Studio Code from Microsoft. You can right-click on some code and say, hey, debug this code. I spent too much time at the party last night. I can't remember what I'm writing. Fix the bugs for me. And as Paul showed in the intro video, Microsoft Copilot, Google Docs, and Google Workspace, these prompts are going to be in everything. Adobe Photoshop has them now. Adobe Illustrator has them now, and more is coming. The most important thing you can do for your company is to build a prompt library. This is where your employees all record the prompts that they're using and the results they get, ideally, in some form of knowledge management system. It doesn't matter what. It can be Evernote, Microsoft OneNote. For those poor souls who have somehow been reincarnated, unfortunately, you can use SharePoint. Whatever the knowledge management system you have, make sure that there's a library so that people can learn from each other's prompts, because every employee will be using these. And you want to have a central repository. And by the way, two very important things with these prompt libraries. One, prompts are software. Right? If you are programming a computer to do something, you're coding. Right? And even if you're coding in the English language, or the language of your choice, you are still coding. So you want to protect your prompt library, which means probably don't let employees post, hey, here's the top 50 ChatGPT prompts I like to use at work on LinkedIn, because they're giving away your code. Right? And two, if you store the prompts and the results, that becomes a training library for when you want to start building your own models later on. So it's super important, super valuable to do. Second step is prompt deployment. So a lot of these tools, when you come up with a prompt that works really well, that does exactly what you want, you probably don't want to keep reusing that over and over again by yourself. You want to take that, put it into some actual computer code, and run it at scale. This is an example. I wrote a prompt to do sentiment analysis. I got it working really nicely, and I wrote some code so that we could do 10,000 of these at a time, instead of me having to copy and paste in ChatGPT 10,000 times, right? We want to now deploy by programmatically using the best prompts. Again, that's why you need a prompt library, so that you can store and find the best prompts and deploy them at scale in your company. From there, you'll probably, depending on your use case, be doing some fine-tuning of models. Fine-tuning a model is kind of like taking a dog that was good at a bunch of things and training it to be really good at sniffing for bombs, or sniffing for drugs, or sniffing for earthquake survivors. When you do that, that dog gets really good at that thing but can't do those other things anymore, right? The dog will not be, if you train the dog to find drugs, it can't then go and capably search for earthquake survivors. This is just not how it's trained. That's what you're doing when you're fine-tuning a model. You're taking an existing model that's kind of good at everything and saying, now you're going to be good at one thing. You have data in your organization to help do this. The challenge is you need to find it. You need to find the data and get it ready. And there are a gazillion and a half free tools that will do that. The hard part is putting that data together and deciding what it's going to be. So in this example, our CEO, Katie Robert, writes blog posts regularly. We exported all of her blog posts from our CMS system and said, I want to fine-tune a model to talk like Katie, because no matter how much you prompt something, it never quite gets it exactly right. When you fine-tune, you say, okay, model, you're now going to have a harder time writing song lyrics. You're going to have a harder time analyzing Google Analytics data, but you are going to talk like Katie. And you are going to do that really well, and it gets her voice perfectly. Right, so fine-tuning models, and you are probably going to do this for very specific high-value tasks in your organization. If there's something that is part of your company's secret sauce with AI, you're going to probably be fine-tuning a model so that you have it, and more importantly, it's under your control. You will especially be doing this if you're working with sensitive data. Right? So maybe you work in healthcare and you have a bunch of EMRs, electronic medical records. You absolutely do not want to hand that to a company like OpenAI, but you absolutely can train it and tune it on your company's servers and now deliver better quality service to your patients. Maybe open up a patient gateway where they can ask questions. I did a talk recently to a gynecology center, which was super awkward. And one of the questions they said was, what if we have all this information? What can we do with it? I said, you could put together a patient gateway that would have a bot that could answer your patient's specific questions really, really well, based on all the things that your practice sees. The nice thing about fine-tuning models is the more tuned they are, the shorter the prompt you need, because they are only good at that one thing. You don't need to tell it you are an expert at bomb sniffing, or you are an expert at being Katie Robert. It knows that because that's all it can do. And finally, app construction. So these models can now be chained together in sequences and pieces. There are open source tools like LangChain that essentially are glue that hold together different prompts. If you've ever worked with something like ChatGPT and you've asked it follow-up question after follow-up question, these software tools, LangChain being one of them, it's open source, do that programmatically. So you can now construct very sophisticated apps and even agent networks using open source tools. The key thing is this: everyone is a developer. The moment you write your first prompt, you are a developer. You are a coder, whether you know it or not. So how's this going to impact marketing? Well, it's for folks in this room, particularly anyone who's done things like content marketing, SEO, it's pretty clear what's going to happen, right? People use these tools like search engines even though they're not. So one of the things you'll probably want to do is ask each of these models, what do you know about your company, your brand, your products, your executives? Ask them, and if the results are not what you want, you have to deal with that, right? Go through each of these tools, ask them all, what do you know about our company? Here's the big impact. If you look at your search metrics and you do a lot of unbranded search volume, that's a key traffic driver, that is going to be substantially harmed. Right? These models, people will ask them for questions, and you can see there's not a ton of links, there's not a ton of opportunities, or no links whatsoever. So if people are using these tools as knowledge assistants, they are not going to ask you those questions because they're going to get the answers from a model. One of the first things that you should do is go into Google Search Console or Bing Webmaster Tools, whichever ones you use, and count up, just easy, count up the percentage of search queries that are branded, that are about you, and unbranded. And if more than 50% of your search traffic is unbranded, you need to be defending against that sooner rather than later. How do you defend against that? 3 ways. 1, you need to build your brand. If brand building is not a strategic pillar for your company this year, it needs to be. Right? Go smack whoever needs to be smacked to help them understand. Brand building is number 1 on your list because people will not ask questions of search engines anymore that they can get answers from models out of. The way you get into models is by building a brand because they are trained on text. They're trained on text. So the more text there is about you on the internet, the more a model will associate that with you. If you don't have a good PR agency, get one. If you don't have a good PR team in-house, get one because you need to be everywhere. If you are working on building your personal brand, say yes to every podcast that asks you to be on it, right? Like, hey, here's a podcast with 2 listeners. Why? Because it's text. The models don't care how popular the podcast is. The model just says, hey, here's some more free text that I can incorporate. Be everywhere. 2, have a publication platform of some kind that allows you to sidestep other people's AI. Email newsletter is the one I personally use because it allows me direct communication with my audience. There's no AI in the way. Do not use search. Do not use, for sure, don't use social media, right? Because there's always somebody's AI in the way. But something like text messaging, heck, even direct mail would be perfectly fine because you know that your content is actually getting to the people you care about. And 3, have a community. This is our Slack group, Analytics for Marketers. You saw the Marketing AI Institute Slack group. These communities that are in these private areas, Slack, Discord especially. I would say if you're going to start a community in 2023, do it on Discord. Again, there's no AI in the way. Right? It's just you talking directly to your customers. Let's talk about your career. Who's going to lose their jobs? The Brookings Institute loves to say AI will take away tasks, not jobs, and that is partially true. But what's really true is that a person who is skilled with AI will take the jobs, plural, of the people who are not. Let's go back to 1746. There's a group of people who made thread. They were called spinsters. They spun textiles into threads. In that year, the spinning jenny was invented. This did the work of 10 people. Right? So it was a supply chain change. The individual spinster basically went out of business. Instead, some of them went on to be spinning jenny operators. This was a labor change. It was a massive labor change. So the person who is skilled with AI is essentially the person who takes this job, and the other 9 spinsters or places, they don't have one. However, this creates a problem. Now you can make 10 times as much thread. So now you have a supply chain bulge, and now you need more people who are weavers to weave thread and so on and so forth. The same thing is happening in AI. If you get rid of all your writers and you have one person making a whole bunch of content, your editors are like, well, we were editing 10 blog posts a month and now you're giving us 10,000, thank you. You now need more editors. So labor is going to change to adapt to the supply chain changes we are creating. On May 2nd, the Writers Guild of America went on strike. Noon, they went on strike. 14 minutes later, just got my first inquiry from a studio needing a writer to use some AI to write dialogue. That's how fast this stuff is happening. The person who's skilled with AI will take the jobs of people who are not skilled with AI. Thankfully, you are in the correct room. You are at the correct event. But think of all the people who are not sitting here that should be. So what's next in the last few minutes here? These tools are multimodal today. They can write song compositions really well. ChatGPT can do that. And there are dedicated ones like Voice Gen, for example, and Music Gen, which is Google's, that can create music that actually sounds okay. It's not great, but it's okay. Bard can ingest images and spit out analysis. If you work in marketing, this is an enormously valuable tool. Take any screenshot of a dashboard from your CRM, your marketing automation software, and say, analyze this for me so that I don't have to. And it will tell you what it sees in those images. This is one of the NPS scores that we did. You can do this today. It's super, super easy, and it is incredibly valuable. If you write client reports, if you write any kind of reports with charts and graphs, have the tools interpret that. This capability, by the way, is enormously powerful. Using it for marketing charts is kind of like taking a Harrier to the grocery store. Imagine being able to take things like MRIs and saying, tell me what I missed in this diagnosis. Right? That's where these tools are going. If you want some fun media, go search for Pepperoni Hug Spot on YouTube. This is a fully AI-generated commercial that took 3 hours for someone. It's creepy. Like you can tell it's not quite right, but everything was assembled by one guy doing that. Just one guy on his spare time assembling a commercial. And regular companies are doing this. Coca-Cola's Masterpiece used the Stable Diffusion library to create an AI-generated ad that was actually really cool, really clever. AI agent networks are the most interesting thing that's happened recently. Here's one called GPT Author. You give it an outline and it generates a 15-chapter novel. Now, I've tried this. It's okay. It's not amazing, but it's not bad. And it's certainly not bad enough to be able to spend some more time tuning the prompts to build entire books, like entire novels. This is a fun one. So this is a piece of software I use. It's open source called Silly Tavern. It's a role-playing software for things like if you want to role-play Dungeons and Dragons or whatever. I used it for not its intended purpose, and I made a virtual focus group with 3 other people who are not human: Erica Expert, Nellie Novice, and Indigo Intermediate. And I gave them prompts about their biographies and said, we're going to have a focus group discussion about Google Analytics, about how you would use it. If I blocked out those names and you read this focus group conversation where I'm the only human in there and they're talking to each other, you wouldn't know that this wasn't people. Right? So virtual focus groups, synthetic focus groups is a capability that these models have that I ran on my laptop. I ran on a MacBook Pro. This is not super powerful, billions of dollars. This is one person doing this on a Saturday night because I have no life. Paul showed you the South Park episode. The one thing he didn't mention is that 22-minute South Park episode was done in 3 hours. Right? If you've ever worked in entertainment, you can't get a writer's room to agree on a plot in 3 hours, much less generate an entire episode, soup to nuts, because they built this enormous agent network of multiple AI systems talking to each other, glued together with LangChain, so that you end up with a system that is more powerful than any one AI engine can deliver. Right? It's super powerful. Open source. It is difficult to overstate how important things like LLaMA and other models are. This gives access to everyone, right, without paying the OpenAI tax. When LLaMA 2 was announced, within 24 hours, there were 310 new variations as people were starting to spin these things up and make them do other things, tune them to specific kinds of tasks. Stable Diffusion this morning announced Stable Diffusion XL 1.0, open source. You could take this, put it on your laptop today, and start doing incredibly good quality image generation. We are seeing app ecosystems showing up. This is a model called Karen the Editor. It's a fine tune. Karen the Editor only edits grammar, right? And that's all it does. So think about highly specialized models that you don't have to build. The open source community is building these things, but you can use them within your organizations for free. There's systems like Silly Tavern is one. Even in ChatGPT, the plugin store, there are these ecosystems now. And if you're not going to work with AI stuff directly, but you're a software company, you might want to think about what's it going to take to have our company be a participant in these ecosystems. How do we leverage them to build our reputation? These apps are starting to become creative. So one of the things that models do is they make mistakes. They're called hallucinations. And this group called DreamGPT is saying maybe those hallucinations aren't bad. Maybe we should be harnessing them instead. And so you give it a prompt, and it starts coming up with things, and then instead of getting rid of the hallucinations, it collects them. because that's how human creativity tends to work. We have selective memory. And then it comes up with new innovative ideas based on the things it knows it got wrong. Right? So these models can be creative. And these things are accessible. Again, they're in Photoshop, they're in Unity, Unreal Engine's MetaHumans. Unreal Engine's coming up with a version that is generative, that you just give it a prompt and say, show me a fantasy world with forest trees and elves and stuff, and it creates these incredible environments that are going to change the entertainment industry forever. Right? You will have the ability to make your own feature film from your desktop in probably a couple of years. Again, the LLaMA thing's important. For those who remember, in 2007, Google released Android for free to the world to take over the mobile market. Facebook is doing that, Meta, with LLaMA. That is so important because now you're going to see this stuff everywhere. If you are a software company that is not integrating language models, you need to be. So to wrap up, everyone is a developer. Everything you do, if it's a word you type or a word you say, everything is software. And every word is an opportunity. Thank you very much. Thank you. So good. Thanks, sir.
We're going to breakouts. Just around a few minutes behind, but we're going to start breakouts right around 9:30. So grab a coffee and a drink in the bathroom. We're going right into breakouts. Thanks, everybody.
And there you go. Thank you.
So interesting.
Thank you.
It's so much better to hear it out loud. I mean, I obviously read the slides, I know what's coming, but I just love hearing you say it. You're such a talented speaker.
Thank you. I appreciate it. That was
Thank
fun.
you. That was really fun. You, the way you can pick up the pace between the different sections, I was like, there's no way he's getting through all these slides. And then all of a sudden you're like 20 slides ahead. I'm like, how did you do that? But they all had such value. So
Thank you.
Thank you. You sticking around for the rest of the conference?
Oh, yeah.
Right?
Yeah, definitely.
Awesome.
Great work.
Thank you, sir.
Great work. That's good.
All right. How you been?
Good. Doing good.
Fantastic talk.
Thank you.
So
Appreciate it.
much.
Thank you.
How about you? Everything good?
It's been crazy busy, which is good. Better than the alternative.
That's definitely true.
We are playing around with a lot of all the open source stuff because it's free, obviously, but it is so powerful. Thank you. Appreciate it.
Great job. Thank
Thank
you.
you.
Brian,
Thank
good
you.
to see you again. You were just here a couple months ago.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
So the clicker will be on the lectern. You got a confidence monitor in front of you. Your slides will be up. You've already got a mic on you. Anything special about your presentation?
No.
Sorry. Thank you. Appreciate that.
Can I mention one thing to you about
Sure.
your supply and demand comment? I almost got that, Rick.
It's good.
Unfortunately, if you're creating super workers that are displacing non-AI using workers, there is no demand for the supply you're creating.
Yes.
And so that's where I
Yes. We have
all this stuff that people are talking about, they're leaving that piece out. It's aggravating me.
one of the things that we need to have a very serious discussion about, like